But life is a dream that calculus could never predict.
This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring. Today I'm going to share one of my favorite videos to make each year, which is the one where I go back and highlight all the amazing accomplishments that the students that I've worked with over the past 12 months have earned. So this is going to focus a lot on SAT results, but there's also ACT math results and high school and college, math course results as well. So let's go ahead and just highlight some of these. Okay, so first up was a student who had a starting score of around 700, ended up getting a final score on the second attempt of the math section of 790. 90-point increase, very, very nice increase and overall score. And this happened in September of 2025. One thing I do want to mention is that if you see an asterisk next to the starting score, that means that the score was basically like from practice tests and is not an official starting score from, say, an official exam or PSAT test. Those will just be listed as normal, but if there's an asterisk next to the number, that just means it's basically, an estimated starting score from practice tests. Okay, next up, there's another student who I worked with, I think we met a total of like 6 times maybe, who increased the SAT math score by 60 points, from 640 to a 700, which is still a pretty good increase. And that happened in September of last year. Moving on, there's another student who I had worked with throughout most of the summer and was scheduled to take the test in September and had been doing, very well on the Blue Book practice test. Had been scoring, in the 700s on those after starting off at a 560 from, back an official score back in the spring. But unfortunately, had a medical issue occur, the week leading up to the September test. Therefore, could not take the September test. Then eventually, then took the October test, essentially about a month later, and unfortunately only increased by 40 points. So there was still an increase, in the math score, but like I said, unfortunately it was not, not as high as I, or the student was expecting due to some unforeseen circumstances. Next up, there's another student that I worked with who was starting off in around the 700 range and ended up scoring a 790 on the December 2025 test. So again, a massive increase of 90 points and, again, very nearly a perfect score. Now we can turn to those that tested in 2026. So I have a student from back in March who had a very significant increase, 130 points. Started off at a 590, ended up in March at a 720. Next, there was a student who I worked with for a couple sessions that, again, did not have any official score, but basically, estimated from practice test was around a 750, and this student ended up earning a perfect score of 800 on the March 2026 digital SAT math exam. Again, the increase itself, isn't that large, only 50 points, but still, the accomplishment here is the perfect score, the 800. Next up, there's another student who I worked with over a fairly long period of time and had taken the test multiple times. And finally, by the last attempt in May, earned a score of 790. Basically after starting off at 730. So again, pretty significant increase, 60 points, but more importantly, nearly a perfect score on the math section. Next up is another student who ended up with a final score of 790 after starting off at 710. So again, another significant increase, 80 points. The 790 was earned on the June 2026 exam, just a little over a month ago. And again, very nearly, a perfect score. Similarly, there was another student who I worked with prepping for the June exam whose starting score was a 700, so kind of, around the same ballpark. and also earned a 790 on the June exam. So the increase, of course, here is slightly bigger at 90 points, but still an excellent final score. Again, very nearly a perfect score on that exam. Next, I'll just talk about one ACT student that I worked with last fall. This student started with a 20. This was actually from the pre-ACT, essentially the equivalent of the PSAT in the math section, and ended up increasing that to a 28. So, it's an overall 8-point jump in the math score, which is huge. And that test was just taken in September of 2025. Now let's talk about some students I worked with throughout the school year on their high school math courses. So there were two that, basically I worked with pretty much throughout the entire school year, almost every week. Helped both of them kind of maintain, a B plus or A minus average in their courses. One was a senior that was taking Math 3. The other was a sophomore that was taking Math 2. So they both, overall did very well in those classes. And then the third student that's highlighted here was actually a student who I started working with in, I think it was the middle of March, at which point that student's average essentially was an F. The student was failing the course, and we managed to raise that up to a B by the end of the school year. And that was also in Math 2 as well. So that student, basically showed huge improvement overall, just in such a short time period at the end of the school year. Now, I also want to highlight a student who took AP Calculus BC this year. This student, took AP Calculus AB last year, and I helped the student earn both an A in the course and a 5 on the AB exam last year. And it was no different this year. Student earned an A, for the overall regular course grade, but also earned a 5 on the AP exam as well. You can see basically the screenshot, that the student sent me there. So that was another, fantastic high school math result. And then lastly, I do want to highlight there was a student that was taking a final for Math 128, which is essentially a trigonometry course, kind of pairs with or follows college algebra. Anyways, this student needed to do well on the final. We essentially met for, I think it was a total of like 5 hours over, I think either 3 or 4 days, kind of prepping for the final, covering as much material as we could. And it paid off because the student, ended up earning an 82 on the final, which ended up getting, basically a satisfactory, overall grade for the course. So, thank you for watching this video. If you are interested in tutoring, whether it's for the SAT, ACT, or for high school math or college math, feel free just to reach out to me. You know where to you can find my email address, or you can also reach out on my Facebook page as well, or you can also look me up on Reddit, contact me there. But otherwise, if you did like this video, of course, please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, sign up for notifications, and best of luck in whatever math it is that you're studying, whether it's the SAT or the ACT or any high school or college course.